What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about that big rumor on PlayStation, and it originates from 4chan, so we're going to talk a little bit about that first, but I want to go over each bullet point. I know there's been other channels that have done it as well and done it really, really well, so hopefully I can provide something a little bit extra to the conversation or just something you haven't heard yet. But the first thing, of course, is that 4chan, and as it's probably been said, the first thing that comes up when you hear rumors from 4chan is most times you throw it away. Now, I've talked about this before with actually other companies even besides Sony. Sometimes you don't, though. Sometimes you do have to be aware that some things could originate there. I like to bring up the Sly Cooper thing, even though it doesn't have a pleasant ending, in that started at 4chan, and then it kind of was taken from 4chan, and Special Nick, right, Nick Baker, took it and said, wait a second, no, this is actually real. Kept going, eventually, turned out to not be real. But, things can have a really funny way of working themselves out, I guess, when it comes from 4chan. So I'll tell you right now, off the jump, I think these are just guesses. I don't think this is actually somebody with info. I think these are good guesses. I think this is a really solid list, and I agree with a lot of it. I also think the things that aren't included on this list are important to help it, right? No Sly Cooper, no Bloodborne. These are things that maybe would appeal to people, right? If I saw Sly Cooper on there, I would flip out and be excited. But you do also have to have the thought that, well, by putting it on there, you really make it seem like it's not going to happen now because we kind of know it's not going to happen, right? So again, I think this is just somebody who's good at guessing, and I do think a lot of these things are going to end up being accurate, but I don't, and again, who am I necessarily to say, right? Take it all with a grain of salt, including my own opinions, but I think it's just somebody kind of throwing out guesses. I don't think it's somebody in the know, but that could also be wrong, right? So let's read it out. PC ports planned for the next 12 months include The Last of Us 2, Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, Demon Souls, and Horizon Forbidden West. Naughty Dog will reveal a PS5 port of The Last of Us 2, a new Uncharted game that is both a sequel to Uncharted 4 and a soft reboot to the series that they are offering support development of, with the primary devs being Malaysia and Visual Art Studio, and release of The Last of Us multiplayer game for summer/fall 2023, and a new IP set in an open-world fantasy game. The only IPs getting revived on PS5 are Killzone, which will be a VR game after release of Call of the Mountain, Motorstorm, Ape Escape, whose developers unknown, and PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. PlayStation Showcase coming in June, State of Plays in February or March, and then May. Sucker Punch is working on a new IP, reveals for Bend, Pixel Opus, and Asobi's projects. Media Molecule is making a Dreams sequel, which is an expanded version of Dreams on PS5 and VR2 support. Several games as a service titles will get a full reveal. Firewall, Deviation London, Gorilla, Naughty Dog, and Arrowhead, new PS2 emulator, and an official PS3 emulator. So again, here's the deal. All of those sound plausible to a certain degree. Every single one of them. Even the ones you want to go crazy on, like PlayStation All-Stars. I smile when I read it out loud and I kind of chuckle, but in reality, considering the push for those kind of games with multiverses and Nickelodeon and obviously Smash, again, I personally believe PlayStation All-Stars were just ahead of the curve, ahead of the game, besides obviously Smash Bros. But I think that does make sense to a degree, right? Is it something, again, kind of throwing it in there to make it more appealing to certain groups? Like, I think PlayStation All-Stars, maybe even like a Motorstorm, but you could argue either way, those are maybe the equivalent of like Sly Cooper or Bloodborne. But again, not having Sly, which by the way, if this is true, Sly Cooper not being on there, big miss, as I've always said about 1,000 times, and I'll never stop. But no, I really am serious. A lot of these things are, I would say, believable to some sort of extent. So you got the PC ports. I think those all make sense with The Last of Us Part 1 coming out. You know that Part 2 eventually makes it. Ghost of Tsushima's big. Demon Souls. I think Demon Souls was even rumored, or even the leak from years ago. So that probably was already, again, like that's something that I think you probably could have looked elsewhere to find out. Horizon, that also makes sense considering Zero Dawn. So I think a lot of these things are kind of thrown together through other info, including the next one, right? So you got Naughty Dog. So what do you got there? So a PS5 port of The Last of Us. some sort of director's cut. Doesn't take a genius to assume that that could happen. The new Uncharted game, it's like, all right, well, here's the deal. We have heard time and time again about this new Uncharted game. In fact, the last rumor with the Uncharted game is that Naughty Dog will kind of get them started, kind of hand it off, and then they're going to, pull away, and it's going to be a new studio, and it most likely was going to be that visual art studio. So that is not new, and I like to throw those out there, right? Because I do cover a lot of rumors, a lot of leaks. It's fun to see where they originate from, and then people, again, I think in this case, not like necessarily, maybe, but maybe not, maliciously stealing it. They're taking it, adopting it, and then also just kind of throwing out guesses. So their guess, right, the extra sauce on this is that they think it's going to be an Uncharted 4 sequel, and that it would be a sequel but also a soft reboot, which makes sense. I've always kind of said that. You have Nate in it, but you have it be focused on his daughter. I think that's the best of both worlds. That's what I would do. That's what I would assume they would do, and that is the guesswork, right? Or I guess that would be, if you believe this is an actual like insider, that's the new insider information. The rest of it's not new. The rest of it is either stolen or they're just repeating it, and it's important to kind of throw that out. The Last of Us multiplayer game is interesting. I believe it because, again, I assume we're going to see it in June for the 10-year anniversary of The Last of Us, and then it's a coin toss. Do you think it's going to come out in the fall right after they fully show it, or do you think it's going to come out in 2024, right? That's where that coin toss is. And then the fantasy game. I mean, that's, I think a lot of us assume it's going to be the fantasy game, right? And then the next one was the Revival franchises. Killzone, I think, makes a lot of sense. Again, very, very believable. A Killzone VR game, I think, works really, really well. MotorStorm, I would say, also works really well, considering you have Gran Turismo, you have simulation, but you don't have that kind of wild one, but you do. It's just kind of locked away in a vault, so that does make sense to me. Ape Escape is an odd one to me. I don't know if you can put it in the same category as, like, if you were to bring back Jak and Daxter or Sly. Like, are they all in one kind of thing and you're just pulling Ape Escape? Personally, I would prefer Sly, but I guess that's not going to happen, again, if you believe this. And then PlayStation All-Stars, again, we talked about that. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring that back. I really do. And then it would just become, what do you build off of the first game? Do you keep all those characters? Do you add more? There's some third-party ones there as well. Do you eliminate any? Because if you eliminate some of the old ones, like Fat Princess or Sly or stuff like that, I think that would be quite interesting, right? Then you have the PlayStation Showcase in June, so not September, in June. I assume the thought process there is just during E3 time, right? They would just kind of do a substitute thing. And then a State of Play, basically 2 of them right before it, February and March, and then in May. So maybe the May one is like a Final Fantasy kind of thing, or like a Japanese developer kind of thing, and the February, March isn't. I don't know why you would need to have, for a company that, now they have had State of Plays, right? There were State of Plays this past year, but for a company that hasn't had a showcase since September of 2021, to have 3 shows in, 4 months is actually quite insane, and I don't think that's going to happen. In fact, that would probably be the least believable thing on this list, personally, to me, unless they're talking about, again, kind of hyping up one specific game, because the May one could just be a Final Fantasy one, and the February, March, maybe that's a more, just random kind of one. Then it would make, I guess, a little bit more sense, but it's just been a while since we've had that many PlayStation events in such short time, right? Maybe it's kind of broken me inside. Sucker Punch working on a new IP, that's fascinating, because I do believe they're doing Ghost 2. Like, there's no doubt in my mind they're making a Ghost of Tsushima 2. So this is also, again, where things maybe start to not necessarily fall apart, but holes start to get popped in it, right? Where, okay, well, if you're going to say that, do you want to kind of throw out there as well that they're making a Ghost 2, but they have 2 studios, and so they're making a new IP and a Ghost 2? Because I would believe that. I do think that's a very possible thing that could be happening. But at the same time, you don't throw that out there. So you almost make it seem like that is the next game. They're not doing Ghost of Tsushima 2. They're just doing a new IP, which I don't believe that's going to happen, personally. Then the reveals, right? Reveals from Bend, Pixel Opus, and Asobi. Look, I'll take all of them. I do think you get all of them. I'd even throw in Blue Point as well. I think this could be a year you get 4 or 5 studios that haven't been, active in a while. I think you get their announcements. What's funny, that Pixel Opus, that was the rumored studio for the Sly Cooper game. So it'll be really interesting, actually, to see what they are working on. Were they ever working on a Sly or what? If not, whatever. But they're a very talented team, Concrete Genie and all that. So I believe it. But again, that's taking a look, I would say, at studios that haven't talked in a while and assuming, well, it's been long enough, let's get them out there, right? So that's probably how that was thought of. The Media Molecule Dreams sequel, but then they say basically it's just Dreams on PS5. That makes sense, and also VR support, that also makes sense. The games as a service, in fact, I actually said that a few weeks ago. I did, or not, well, maybe 1 week ago. I did the video previewing 2023 for PlayStation, 2023 for Xbox, and one of the things I talked about for PlayStation is I do think this is the year that we hear a lot about their games, their live service games, right? They have 10 of them in all, The Last of Us being one. I think Twisted Metal is another one, and then you got a bunch of other ones, and there you go, Firewall, Deviation, all that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Again, doesn't take a genius there. And then the last one, maybe also the most far out there one, although it's based on, I think, a little bit of research, right? So the PS2 emulator and official PS3 emulator, I think that could be from different kind of patents. I think Sony has definitely hinted that they're investing or researching or whatever in possible technology that can make this happen. And when you patent something, though, you don't have to do it, right? You're just kind of like labeling it. So I do think, again, it's a shot. It's definitely like you're taking a big risk by saying that. Again, if you believe this is an insider, because it's very possible it doesn't happen. But it's not the most wild thing of all time because there is enough, I would say, out there to suggest Sony's trying. I think the PS3, we all kind of know, the PS3 is just an incredibly difficult system. Like, just flat out, I do think the whole streaming thing through what used to be PS Now and all that stuff, that probably wouldn't happen if the PS3 wasn't just a garbage, like nobody understands how to use the console back then. Nobody knows how to use it now. It's a hard system to develop, right? It's not a garbage system. It actually has some of my favorite games of all time on it, but it's a hard system. So that's, the day we get a PS3 emulator is the day that a lot of us win in life, right? So, I mean, if you want to believe that, that's great, but that is a far out there shot, but it is, again, based somewhat on reality. So, again, like literally breaking down every single bullet point, they all do have some sort of, they're taking it from something we've heard before. They're making educated guesses. This is a really well thought out, I would say, leak or rumor or whatever. But I really don't think this person is in the know. I think this person is just making educated guesses based off what's already out there, which is fine. Now, saying you're an insider, that obviously changes, the perspective a little bit. I could see a lot of these things happening, and the ones I'd say, if you want like the number one thing, like the biggest things I'd like to see, I think those franchises returning is really interesting. Specifically, PlayStation All Stars. If we got an All Stars 2, that would be the biggest thing I'd say from this whole list that I would even over. I mean, the Uncharted thing is just such an unknown. Uncharted's my favorite franchise, but PlayStation All Stars, I love that game to death. So that would be one. I guess the Uncharted one definitely would be like a top 3, and the PS3 emulator, that would be another one. So if we got those 3 and none of the other things, that's okay. I would take that from this list. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I'll see you all on the next one.